Well, good morning. My name's Teresa, for those of you who don't know me, and I was the youngest pastor here, but thanks to Dan, I guess I'm not anymore, so I'm the middle one. I'm not the senior pastor. That's David, for sure. But I'm not the youngest anymore, haha. He loves senior pastor. He tries to get away with lead pastor. We call him senior pastor. So, are we ready? We're on week 3 of a series that we started a couple weeks ago, Ready, Set, Go. And we are getting ready to go this week. It's time to go. Week 1, we got ready. And we did things like we planned the race that we were going to get into and what plan we were going to take to train for it properly. Do you guys remember that? And we talked about the fact that we all had our individual races, but we're running this together. We're running for the same cause. And we did all of the things that we needed to do to get ready for that race. And then last week we talked about getting set. And what were we going to get set in? We were going to get set in faith, right? Not in worry. And so we talked about shutting things out, like distractions that strayed us from the goal, and really waiting patiently for our cue to go. So that's what we did in the last couple weeks. So today, the gunshot sounding. You're in those blocks and the gunshot sounded. And it's time for us to take off into this race. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So let me tell you, this has been quite the process for me. See, I think that my words gain validity when I speak from experience to you, and I've always thought so. So I like to have experience to hook back to when I'm presenting a message. And this series in particular, I had actually planned quite some time ago. So it was months and months and months ago. But I'll tell you what, you know what's happened to me? Each and every Saturday for the last 3 weeks, I have sat feverishly writing, rewriting, and pulling this message apart. And the reason that I'm doing that is because each and every week for the last 3 weeks, something has happened. Something has happened in the words that I've spoken that has changed the way that I wanted to deliver this message to you. So I'm writing like crazy. I'm revamping. And they're all personal experiences. And see, God knows my love of organization, so he thinks this is a funny little joke that he's playing on me, you know. So we're doing like 3, 4 o'clock yesterday. I'm revamping things. And I told you guys last week when I started this, I had really very little intention on actually bringing the athletic training part of this literally into my life. Really very little intention, but then I had this friend who will remain unnamed that forced me into practicing what I preach. So here I am, 6:30 a.m. now. I'm hitting the pavement 3 to 4 times a week, actually physically training because of the words that I've spoken and people who just won't let me preach things that I won't practice. So it's not just that. It's this week. We had to talk about what race we're in. We had to identify the race we're in. We had to talk about the what, where, when, and why this week. And this is what took me on a journey, a big journey. So you guys all walked in the door this morning in the midst of your own race. Now, you have your own race, but we're all running for the same cause. You know what I'm talking about. In the world of races, if you actually run them, you would meet people who only run for particular causes. So I would meet people who only ran for breast cancer runs. And see, there's all kinds of runs you can participate in to benefit breast cancer. There's Susan B. Komen races, there's Making Strides, there's Think Pink, there's Run for a Cure, there's all kinds of races. So you can actually pick those out so that you're running for the cause that's near and dear to your heart. So that's kind of what we're all doing here. We all picked the cause that we're running for that's near and dear to our heart. They all take place, these races do, at different places, different times, in different terrains. They're different lengths. They're different levels of difficulty, right? But they're all for the same cause. In the end, the same cause is benefited. And that's kind of what we're doing here. We're running our own race, but benefiting the same cause. So as we walk through the door with this same cause, we still had our own individual race. Maybe you're a parent of a young child that's going to start school for the very first time this year, so you're kind of getting geared up for the fall, getting ready for that, right? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you just sent your final child off to college, and now you're getting ready to start the race of that empty nest. You're going to see how that goes. Or maybe you're that child that just got sent off to college and you're embarking on this new race, this new thing, this post-graduation thing. That's an exciting race. You guys remember that? I don't remember that. That's an exciting race. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Maybe you've just gotten set free from an addiction or some other path that was destroying you, and you're ready to start a new life, a new race. There's all kinds of races being run. Maybe you're just starting it. Maybe you're in the middle of it. Maybe you're at that last leg of it. But you're in a race right now. And see, that's what I had to start thinking about, is what race am I in right now? Now, I began probably my most noteworthy race probably about the age of 15, 16 years old. So I've told you before, my family ran a business, a restaurant, so I grew up in the business, so I was working from a really young age. So by the time I was 15 or 16, I was actually working full-time, especially over the summers. So my parents decided one day they're going to strike up this deal with me because I was getting a little antsy at 15 and a half, 15 and 3/4, because there was something coming that I wanted to do. So my parents struck up a deal. They said, you know what, we'll help you out. You do work hard, we'll give you that. So you put together as much money as you can, and we'll match it so we can get you a car. Talk about excited. So I worked and worked and worked and worked, and man, I put some money away and put some money away and put some money away, and I think that, I ended up about $600, which was huge. Okay, this was just a few years ago, but it was huge at that time. Yeah, just a few years ago, give or take a few. But it was big for me. So we went out and we found a car, and we found a car for $1,000. So I actually had a little more than half, but then they took care of all the plates and the insurance and all that. So it all worked out. And I was thrilled. But what that race did is it made me hungry. Made me hungry for another race, a bigger race. So I started running this race that lasted quite some time. And what happened is that car was great, but a few years later, a better, nicer car seemed better, didn't it? So I started running for that. And then before you knew it, I was running for a house, because by that time now I was starting to get the family thing going. So I ran to get a house. And then we had to have some toys, You got to have the camper, you got to have the motorcycle. I don't know, I wasn't so thrilled about the motorcycle, but whatever, but somebody was in my house. So we ran for these things. We ran for them. And then my husband opened a business, and we needed semi-trucks, and we needed employees, which are even bigger things to run for. And we ran, and we ran, and we ran. And this race lasted, 15, 16, 17, 18 years, I guess. And it wasn't all smooth. It was actually really difficult sometimes. It had a lot of obstacles, a lot of roadblocks, and I sacrificed. I sacrificed to stay in that race. But after running so much of that race and running for so long, I sat down and I looked around at where I was at. And I was somewhere that I just didn't expect to be. Because all those cars I ran for were gone. Actually, the house I ran for was gone. The trucks and the camper and all those things that I had gone for were gone. And here I was. I didn't even own a vehicle at the time. I was renting my house. And I had run this race for so long. It took a huge toll on me, mentally, physically. Huge toll. So at that point, I decided I needed a new race, right? What else was I going to do? It was time to start on something different. And I was tired of it. I knew that life that I just ran wasn't for me. I knew it wasn't. So I started running a new race. And you guys know this race. I found out about things like the unhurried rhythms of grace. Have you heard of that? Heard about those things. So I started studying those. And I learned about strength. Strength that rises as you wait. I started learning about stuff like that. Started learning to be still. Stop running so fast and running so hard that there was beauty in being still. And I slowly stopped stressing and striving. And I took a hold of that easy yoke and that light burden. I was an absolutely hopeless Martha that became Mary. Still working on Mary. I'm not quite done with this race. I'm not quite done. And again, this race wasn't smooth at all times. It was difficult sometimes. There were obstacles and roadblocks in my way, and I'll tell you what, I sacrificed. I sacrificed to stay in that race. But this time, when I got to the end, there was somewhat of a reward for me. There was a difference in me, a change in me, a more joyful kind of person. I got to stick this in because it's funny. I just went to see Inside Out because, good movie, I'll tell you what. Somebody was convinced that joy was my personality, like Pixar somehow picked up on my personality. I tell you what, holy man, joy is my personality. Don't know how Pixar did that, but we laughed. But I was actually talking about it this morning, and what just kind of came out of my mouth, it was in prayer actually, what just kind of came out of my mouth is the reason that I'm joy is because of what God put in me. I'm not joy all by myself. I was that other person all by myself. So, joy. There is a difference after I ran this race. But you know, that kind of brings me to where I'm at now. And I sat reflecting yesterday about what race I was in. Because if the first one's over and the second one, it's pretty close to over. I mean, I probably still have a few things to learn, but I've run a good part of it. So where am I at? See, that first race was exhausting and tiring, but it offered me something that the second race didn't. That first race, I was huge on accomplishment. I was huge on accomplishment in the first race. I mean, I did things that got me good promotions and good raises and good positions and good companies, and it wasn't just that. I benefited people. I benefited people that I worked with. I put in place processes that helped the employees. I worked for charitable causes. I had some noteworthy accomplishments in that first race. And although the second race was so needed, I needed to sit quiet in God's presence for a little while and learn slowly to do that. Although it was so needed, it lacked that accomplishment. So I kind of took that up with God. So, what race do you want me in now? Boy, yesterday of all days, I figured that out. See, the race did show me hard work and accomplishment, but my focus was off in that first race. And the second race showed me peace and stillness, but I lacked the accomplishment. So then God just unveiled to me that the two races were meant to be one. And this is the next race I will run. Remember that verse we started talking about in Corinthians? We've been talking about for a few weeks now. It's in the book of 1 Corinthians. It's in your bulletins if you don't have your Bibles. But listen to what Paul says. He says, "Don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets that prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. Disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do as it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I might myself be disqualified." See, when I hear those verses, I realize that wasn't really the second race I was in. That's not what I was doing. It was much more slow-paced, that second race. And I tell you, there was times where I was accused of being lazy in this second race. Like, oh, you're just too lazy to do that? Especially when I got really involved in those unhurried rhythms of grace. When you get really in those, people think you're lazy. Or I was accused of not caring. When people want you to worry and you refuse to worry, and they accuse you of being a not caring person, right? They want you to worry with them. And see, that's the thing, though, is that second race that I ran was just as biblical as the first race, or the race that Paul's talking about here. Both very biblical. So that's when the trigger went off in my brain. I can practice the unhurried rhythms of grace. I can take hold of that easy yoke and that light burden, all while being disciplined in my training. Running with purpose in every step. See, I can do both of those things. All this time, I thought it was an or option. I thought I either ran really hard or sat back and relaxed. I always thought there was an or in between those two. But then you know what came to mind yesterday as I sat putting this all through my head? The tortoise and the hare. We know that story, right? The tortoise and the hare did not run separate races. They ran the same one. I can run the rabbit's race like a turtle. And I can win the rabbit's race running like a turtle. That's what occurred to me yesterday. Lo and behold, the turtle won. I can run both of these races. See, we think in this world we got to be a rabbit to keep up in this race, don't we? That race out there is about being a rabbit. So we have to make ourselves like a rabbit to win that race. But no, we don't. We don't. Who knew? Who knew that so much meaning could come out of this children's story? Who knew? Man, children's stories are just filled with stuff. And I'll tell you, yesterday as I sat and I realized this, and I don't know, it might not be that big to you, but I'm in my head like, woohoo! Wow, I just did it. There's my joy. Woohoo! I'm like, I can do both of these. That's the race I'm going to run. I'm going to run the rabbit's race, but I'm going to run it like a turtle this time. Man, it's exciting to know me. Don't you guys get excited? I get so excited about this. It's so exciting. So now, before I move forward this morning, we start talking about some of the things in this race. I want you to know that that's mine. That's my race, and that's the one that I'm in right now. Like I said, I don't know where you're at in your race. You may be in the beginning, you may be in the middle, you may be in the end. But here's the thing. You might be running a race that's wearing you down, like my first race did, or you might be running a race that's rejuvenating your heart, like my second race did. But whatever it is, you got to embrace the race that you're in today. It's yours. Take hold of it, grab it, hold on to it. See, and if you're sitting here like I was yesterday, hey, this is new news to me, because just yesterday I didn't know what race I was even in. I'm preaching to you about getting in the race, and I can't even clearly see what race I was in. And you know what I did is I took it up with God. And boy, he knocked my socks off, and he'll do the same for you. So if you just don't know what race it is, then take it up with him. But embrace whatever race it's in that you're in right now. So now, any of you guys been across the street to the S word? Sunsplash. My kids aren't in here, are they? We call that the S word in my house. Because let me tell you, when that word gets mentioned in my house, something happens. My kids become incredibly polite. Please, 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 Mom, can we go? Please, please. I get all these pleases, right? And once in a while, they wear me down with their incredible politeness, and I say, all right, we'll go over to Sunsplash. But I'll tell you what, I like going when the teenagers go. When we just have to take the little ones, but when the teenagers go with us, now we're on to something, because here's what happens. Teenagers take off, they take the little ones, they're running on those big slides out there, and you know what me and Eric do? We grab one of those tubes, we lay in that tube, and we float around that lazy river for eternity, if it takes it. We float and float and float around that lazy river. That's what we do. So I love when the teenagers go. So Sun and Splash isn't so bad to me. But what's funny is once in a while, just once in a while, I'll feel a little like having some fun, and I'll jump off that tube. And I'll go and I'll ride some of those slides. I don't ride the big ones, just the little ones. I'm too old for the big ones. Just the little ones, yeah. So I'll ride some of those. And you know, every time I do that, I end up usually having a pretty good time. The kids and I have fun. But I don't do that every time we go. And see, that got me thinking that's kind of the way a lot of us live life. We've got this comfortable, lazy river, don't we? We kind of jump in our tubes, we get nice and comfortable. I don't know if your tube's got a cup holder, maybe you got an umbrella drink. I don't have a cup holder, but maybe you got an umbrella drink and you're in that tube and you're just floating around that lazy river. And all that chaos and that fun and that craziness is all going around you because you actually make your way through the whole park, but you're right in the middle and you just kind of watch it around you. But you're floating around on that lazy river. And once in a while, maybe, you get up and you get off that tube. And you go out and you embrace your race, right? Because that's where the stuff is happening. That's where the fun is. That's where you might even get hurt. You might even get hurt out there, I'll tell you that. But that's where the stuff's going on. So this morning, what I want you to do is I want you to mentally get yourself off that tube. Mentally get yourself off that tube and embrace the race that you're in. because we're getting out of the lazy river, and we're going to go take some of those big, maybe even the big slides. We're going to go take some of those slides, and we're going to live life out there. So why? Why do you need to get off that tube? You're like, what? I don't need to get off the tube. I'm really comfortable here. I don't like to get off the tube. I'm going to tell you why you need to get off the tube. Very first point we have in your bulletins this morning. The reason you need to get off the tube, and I need to get off the tube, is because he came as an example. Who? He. You guys know this verse. My kids, I think this is the first one they memorized in Christian school. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16. We know that verse, don't we? That's the who we're talking about. The guy that said, come with me, I will make you fishers of men. That guy. That's the he we're talking about. He came. See, it's important for us to remember that God sent his Son to pay a price for our sin, and that he lived his life to set an example for us. Why is that so important? We talk about that a lot, but man, I don't know if we stop to actually analyze the importance in this. Because that one single act, sending his Son to die for us, sending us this example of the way we're supposed to walk, that one single act by God, is a definitive argument for the fact that you are here for a purpose, right? Because why in the world did God send his Son to pay for your sins and give us an example to live by if we didn't have a purpose for him? He would have just let us rot in our sin, would he not have? We have a purpose, and we seem to forget that we have a purpose. So that's why we need to get off these tubes and start embracing our race, because he came. He came to give us purpose. You have a purpose in this race. I don't know how long it's been since you've heard those words, but you have a purpose. And if you forget, then wake up in the morning and tell yourself in the mirror. I started telling myself all kinds of stuff in the mirror. Tell yourself in the mirror, I have a purpose. You have a purpose in this race, the race that you're running right now. Now, the second reason that we have to get off those tubes is because he gave me authority. Here's that he again. Who's that guy we're talking about? Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. That guy. But let me go right into these two verses. Because Matthew 28 says, listen to this, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Jesus is saying this. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded to you. Well, you know, kind of sounds like a purpose, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Kind of sounds like maybe there's our purpose. But let's read that next verse, because here's where it gets interesting. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. See, in that first verse, we saw our purpose. He sent us. But not only did he send us with his authority. Now, we're not just representatives of this authority. It's not like we just represent Christ. We have this authority. It's as if he's making his appeal through us. We have the authority he has. His authority is our authority. We talked about this a little bit last week. Remember when I talked about faith and belief? Remember the difference between belief and faith? Belief is subject to logical explanation and reality. Faith is not. Faith is living as though it will happen today. No doubt in your mind, no swaying you like my Sterling in his NBA dream. There's no swaying that. That's faith. That's what we talked about last week. And the reason we struggle with unwavering faith is because we struggle with accepting the reality that we walk with his authority. We walk in his authority. See, what's funny is that a lot of times people don't understand this authority because this authority we try to use it outside of his will. And the authority doesn't work so great when we're pushing outside of his will, but I'll tell you what, when you're inside of his will and you're using that authority, you'll see mountains move. Now, I haven't actually seen literal mountains move, but I'll tell you what, I've seen things bigger than literal mountains be moved. I've seen those things. I've seen prayers be answered. I've seen broken hearts mended. I've seen those things through this kind of faith that I'm talking, with that authority that I'm talking about, because those things happen there. That's the kind of faith we are looking for. The one that moves mountains. Maybe not a literal mountain. We don't need to move a literal mountain, but I'll tell you what, there's a mountain in somebody's life you need to move. There's lots of those. So we're in this race today not only because he gave us a purpose, but because you are running with his authority. You are running with it. It's in your back pocket. You guys ever been to a real race and you see the runners, they take off, and along the way they have these little stations. They have these little stations of water, right? Because you just need to at least just get your mouth wet sometimes along the way, especially if they're distance races. The longer they are, the more water they have, because what happens? Naturally, your body starts to dehydrate. You start to lose water, so you need these things. Now, you can go ahead and run that race without that water. I have. You might make it without that water. It happens. But why would you risk dehydration when you don't have to? See, God's authority is kind of like those water stations. You're running along, and it's getting difficult, and it's getting tough, and your mouth's getting dry, and you can reach out and grab a little authority and take a swig of it and keep running. Or you can pass it on by. He gives you the choice. But his authority is kind of like that water. Now, there's another point in your bulletin, but I've got to correct it. It's a little bit off this morning. Your very last point says, he left me with a promise. And I actually didn't realize this till fairly recently, that I had written that wrong. Because he didn't leave you with a promise. He left you with lots and lots and lots of promises. There's a whole book full of promises is what he left you with. And if you look at those verses that are listed right under that point, you'll see that, he says things like, I am with you, I will never leave you or forsake you, you are chosen, Christ is in you. Those are just a few of the promises. Have you guys read the promises that show up in this book? Like promises like he delivers you from things that enslave you. He delivers you from things like guilt and shame. Do you know that? He delivers you from things like depression, addiction. He delivers us. Those promises are in here. Word for word, those promises are in here. He offers you things like strength and endurance. Have you read that? Those promises are in here. He will give you financial security. He will give you guidance, companionship, love. Those promises are in here. There's lots and lots of promises in here. But here's the problem. Sometimes we just don't stop to claim them. Amen. Yesterday, Cheryl was in need of physical healing. So we went over to her house and we prayed for her. We laid hands on her and we prayed for her. And one of the very first things, we all prayed, and then Cheryl began to pray. And one of the very first things out of her mouth when she said that prayer was, Lord, I claim your healing in my body. Well, look at me. I'm still getting goosebumps over this. I claim your healing in my body. See, you can win the lottery for $1 bazillion, but you don't see a cent of it until you go claim it. And see, the race we're running in right now, we need to claim those things. We need to claim it, just like Cheryl did yesterday. We have to claim our prize. Well, you can run the race and go through that finish line, but if you don't go claim that prize, you don't get it. You got to claim these promises. You have to claim whatever's holding you today. Claim that he can deliver you from it, because he promises that he can, but go claim that. Claim your healing like Cheryl did yesterday. Claim that. Claim your health. He promises you health and prosper. He promises these things. Go claim your financial security. Claim your companionship. Claim your love in your life. Claim strength. Claim energy. Claim those things that he has promised you in there. Claim them. They're there for you to take. So over the past few weeks, we've talked about a lot of different things, but kind of summarized where we're at. And I want to make a few statements about us. And as I make these statements, I want you to hear them as if they're true, because we're going to speak these statements. I'm going to speak these statements in faith. We do not have if we do not ask, but we also do not have if we do not claim. So let's claim some things. We have a place in the race we are running today, right? We have that place. We're claiming that. We have a plan, and we can discipline ourselves. We're claiming the discipline that we know we are capable of. We're claiming that today. We can push through the pain because you know what? We're going to claim each other. That's another gift he gave us, was each other. We're going to claim that gift too. We're going to push through the pain together. We're going to set out in faith and not in worry because faith is what he promised us. We're going to claim faith and not worry. We're going to put worry completely aside. We will not allow ourselves to be distracted because you know what? When you start making these claims, Satan's got no way in. So we are not going to allow ourselves to be distracted. We are claiming that protection. We are going to claim that we will wait, and not only will we wait patiently on the Lord. We will wait for our signal to go patiently. And you know why we're doing all these things? We're going to do all these things because of what we talked about this morning. He came as an example, which reinforces our purpose. He gave us authority, which guarantees our success. And he left us with a lot of promises for this life and the next. And when our faith, this race that we're running, when we've run the final race on the final day, we are going to stand in front of our King and we are going to say something that we have waited to hear for so long. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Would you stand with me and pray?